So we are back with CJ Stewart, the former professional baseball player and now the co-founder and head of Lead. If you missed part one, I do recommend, as always, going back to have a listen before you jump into part two of our conversation. Today's conversation starts with a discussion around accountability and what that looks like in coaching and what is appropriate and effective accountability in sports. CJ and his coaches at Lead are very, very demanding. They aren't willing to sacrifice high standards, and yet at the same time, they have a trauma-informed perspective to coaching. They aren't falling into the trap that I see so many coaches fall into, which is just relying on their own experiences. Instead, they are trusting the research and the science. CJ also is going to share his 4-H framework in working and supporting their athletes. I find it really, really insightful, and I think it will help coaches regardless of the athlete you are working with. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name is JP Nerbun, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nate Sanderson. Betsy Butterick, our other co-host, sat this interview out. The mission of this podcast is to help coaches become better leaders and build better cultures. To learn more about our work as leadership coaches and facilitators, or to check out our online courses and books, go to tocculture.com and betsybutterick.com. Also at tocculture.com, you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter, where you will get the notes to every episode of the podcast and our weekly article and culture builder. Lastly, please be sure to share this podcast with a friend in leadership or coaching, and then have a conversation with them about it. Honestly, that's one of the best things that you can do in helping to promote our work. I say this time and time again, we don't want a lot of listeners. We want people that are having conversations in their clubs, athletic departments, coaching staffs, and on their coaching teams. Right? It's so incredible to hear the stories of coaches who are listening to the podcast with other coaches and then having discussions on the topics that we're covering. I always remind people we're just sharing our perspectives. We aren't always right, but we're committed to getting better. And that's what this podcast is all about. So I want to dive into a little bit about, your thoughts on coaching, right? You just mentioned a little bit earlier in our conversation around the importance of accountability and standards. When you think about the way that you coach, or the way that coaches, you're encouraging coaches to coach within Lead, especially with a trauma-informed perspective, right? Because many of your young men are coming from significant traumatic experiences. Just what are some of the, key elements of what setting high standards and holding athletes accountable look like within your program?
Yeah, I think shared experience is very important. That's why I think that the race piece is very key, because I'm here in the city of Atlanta, serving boys that are living in communities that I grew up in, that I was able to navigate. But we also have some coaches that are all Black but aren't from the community that our boys grow up in. And that's why I'm so grateful for being able to be a part of Amazing Things, and where I can learn and have this expertise about the trauma informed approach. I I get dysregulated really, really fast. And in my years of coaching, prior to getting connected with Megan Bartlett, um, and we got connected with them through Laureus Sport for Good USA. Um, you know, cussing kids out and just being very strong verbal. That was my um, skill set of choice, because it's a lot of what I got growing up. And so with the training that we now have, um, and under the leadership of our CEO, Kelly Stewart, we just have to make sure that we understand that we are in charge, and so we don't have to go out and cuss kids out. We don't have to put our hands on them and things like that. I mean, we are in charge of the opportunity. Um, and even still, with all of that, I don't really have the patience that I should have when it comes down to kids developing the way that they should. So I've now removed myself from the groundwork, but really at a high level as our director of player development, and creating these methodologies and frameworks for our coaches who do have a lot of patience to execute. Um, I describe our organization where our CEO, Kelly, is she's the Space Force, And then our program director, Bree McClendon, is the Air Force. And then we have our program coordinators who are the ground troops, Navy SEAL like. I mean, they're on the ground. And then my job as the chief visionary officer is to go collect weapons for them. But when we first started, I was collecting the weapons on the ground, blowing everything up, and and it wasn't good. So for us, it's just a matter of just really being honest. And quite frankly, I don't have the time or the capacity to be on the ground anymore. So I don't have to be, But there are people that want to be on the ground level. And one of the things that I even do as well too to help me and understand my limitations is I have these two types of attire that I wear. One is what I would consider like all white, and then I have attire where I'm like really getting dirty. So when I show up in all white, I mean, and when I say all white, I'm talking about coming to a game, white sneakers, white pants, white shorts, white shirts. That means I'm not doing anything. I'm not I'm not touching the field. I'm too clean to be doing that. I'm not helping with Gatorade. And when I do show up that way, everybody is very happy about that. But when I'm not showing up in white and I actually got on my field stuff, everybody's like, oh my God, what's about to happen. But anyway, I limit those things, but I have to even be intentional so that everybody can know how I'm showing up and I can remind myself how to show up. So, again, when it comes down for us as coaches, I think we need to really understand ourselves, and we don't have to know everything. We don't have to have a, a great capacity of patience. If you don't have it, just make sure you have people that do, and make sure you have your role and stay in that lane.
There- well, first off, I just appreciate your honesty, your awareness, and your own limitations, and where you're best suited for the organization. But I was curious what do you say to coaches that come to your program or other coaches out there? This is or potentially even athletes. This is very common. Athletes that maybe have gone through something traumatic or that seem to have a preference to the yelling, screaming, threatening, aggressive type coaching. They're saying, but I need that. And that seem to be able to take it because they're from, people say they're from the streets or they're from this type of that's how they grew up. That's how they were raised. They need that type of coaching. What's your response to that?
Um, it's funny because even as I was being well trained by Megan and all these good folks, we had a kid one day in practice, and I lit into him. Oh my goodness. And he started laughing at me. And I mean, I was getting even madder. I'm like, why are you laughing at me? I mean, I'm saying this is so much disrespect. And he said, Coach CJ, he said, I've never heard you talk like this. I've never seen, because I had been so cool and I had been so calm. And so I think for those guys, and I think for the coaches, it is I mean, we definitely need to understand our players, but I think that when we're sitting down and we're figuring out these high standards, what we can't do is we can't compromise ourselves to the point where it's going to make us look bad, especially for people externally. Um, if you give off the appearance of being a fool, then people are going to treat you like you're a fool. And so, just being careful on how we're being perceived. And so if a kid is going to cause me to be that dysregulated, then I definitely can't be around them. So now if I got a coach and I'm talking to my coaches, um, and they're doing anything that's going to jeopardize our organization externally to the point where it's going to give us a bad name, we can't have them. So I just say, you know, build out your standards, make it very clear what you're expecting, and then have swift accountability. So one of the things that like a high standard that I have, which is going to be very simple, but it's something that one of my coaches taught me, who happens to be a white coach, and I've got three black men, um, Emmett Johnson, T.J. Wilson, and Derek Stafford. These are three black men that are amazing in my life. But I got three white men, Dave Whitfield, Mike Hurst, and Tom Cantrell. These white men taught me a lot as well. And Dave Whitfield, what he taught me about was making sure my cleats were clean. And so just developing that discipline in high school, showing up, cleats clean, that require discipline, doing the things that I need to do that I don't want to do. And that's one of the things, even right now, whether it's white players or black players that have ever played for me, one of the things they will tell you is, man, Coach CJ does not play about these cleats. I mean, and so it's crazy. I mean, like that's the one thing that like really, even as I'm thinking about it right now. So if that were to happen to me, and I'm even training my coaches around it, so that's a very high standard and it's a very clear expectation. You not cleaning those cleats is an embarrassment to me. If I show up to a game and your cleats are not clean, you're not playing in the game. Now, what I would do typically would be to like go off on a kid all in his face, but you not playing is going to hurt you even more. So that's what I'm going to focus on. That's the accountability. I need to, if and then, I have to have these things that if this happens, then this is what I'm going to do. And because I have that is clear, then I don't embarrass myself because I go to my then column. If and then.
The standard's been communicated and the consequence. So it's them actually choosing to not meet the standard. They're choosing that consequence, right?
And we go off the rails as coaches when we don't have those two columns.
Hmm.
So the if happens, we haven't thought through the then, so then we'll just go to our default of just yelling at you and screaming and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's my strategy because again, I don't want to have the appearance of being a fool. And then if I have the appearance of being a fool, then I'm gonna lose the support that I need, and then I gotta end up working a job doing something that I really hate to do, and my whole life is just gonna spiral downhill because I'm a coach and I love baseball.
Well, CJ, I want to ask you a little bit about just your experience with Megan. As JP mentioned, I think off air, we've had her on the podcast a couple of times. Dr. Bruce Perry's been on the podcast a couple of times as well. I think when we use this phrase trauma informed coaching, because it's so foreign still, I think in just the coaching vernacular, right? Like that almost seems like some sort of a mystical approach, that's only for the few that understand something that I don't get, right? So you've been through this training, you're using some of the language, we can hear it, and you're talking about, just your self-regulation and some of the self-awareness. But for you personally, what were maybe one or two of the biggest takeaways from that experience with Megan and starting to think differently about what that phrase trauma informed coaching actually means?
Yeah, well, and one of the books that we that was prescribed to us when we were in our cohort, JP, was what happened to you. So not so much of like, what are you doing? That's stupid. You're being stupid. What has happened to you? And so things are happening to people and have happened to people and kids specifically that is causing them to be in a traumatic state where they are doing stupid things. Again, stupidity is I know the right thing to do, but I'm not doing it. Their brain is not allowing them to function properly. Even for myself, I mean, the stupid things that I do. If I'm cussing out a kid for not cleaning his cleats, I'm acting stupid, and because I'm acting stupid and I'm the one doing it, then I am stupid. And so this trauma, but the trauma informed approach is creating that if and then list. I mean, just being proactive, and so just learning from them is just having a strategy around how to engage with people and just respecting the fact that our brains are muscles, and just like we're strengthening our muscles, our legs and our arms, we have to be very intentional with the brain as well. And dysregulated people cannot dysregulate people. So a dysregulated child showing up to me and I'm dysregulated, I'm not going to be able to be of help to them. So that was the thing that I've learned, and then just making sure that you're properly designing um, programming so that kids understand and can see their growth. So even for us, we have a 4-phase approach in our year-round programming that starts in August and ends in July, where there's an assessment phase, an engagement phase, an empowerment phase, and an application phase. And so we have high standards for you to complete these phases. And we have very clear expectation. However, if you're not growing, then you're not going to be able to keep going. And you can start over the next year, but we've had so many of our boys and girls that rise to the occasion because of that approach. So, and also specifically, like you said, JP, we are scouting out Black boys and Black girls that are underperforming in grades, attendance, and behavior that come from low income households. So we're scouting out children that have trauma and have program design to help them overcome it. And we receive the training that we need. And then with the evaluations that we receive from Hello Insight, LEAD is among the top sports-based youth development organizations based on increasing social emotional learning. So those are the areas of academic self-efficacy, positive identity, self-management, contribution. Um, and so the the impact that we're having is being measured. So when we talk about being a trauma informed, having a trauma informed approach, um, it shows. And not only is it showing for the children individually, it's having an impact on their school, and it's also having an impact on their community. And we have proclaimed ourselves as the MVP of SBYD, and that's important for us to be that, and especially in Atlanta, and to do it because we also want and are going to be working this fall to launch a certification process so that Kelly and I don't have to go set up, lead, and all of these different communities. We can have different communities send coaches to us so we can certify them so they can have a trauma informed approach. And in particular, there's a gentleman who is a Korean American, and he talks about a lot of the stress that children are having in the Korean American community that is turning to trauma, resulting in high levels of high rates of suicide. And for him, he shares that there's this high expectation of achievement, academic achievement, preventing children from participating in sports. Because the thought is any time that you have to participate in sports, you could be studying. Well, if high achievement is the goal and they're having high achievement, but they're taking their lives, then what's the point? So we're going to be working with that community to choose a sport and help them to see how sports can increase academic self-efficacy. But you can't just read about it. Information plus experience equals knowledge. So we're real excited about that. Um, so I hope I answered that. I went kind of along the way, but yeah.
No, it's great. And it's so awesome to hear about all the amazing things your organization's doing. I kind of actually want to go back a little bit to the start with our kind of final few questions here, which is just you said you had this career in Major League Baseball. You didn't have the values. You talked about the values, but you didn't. I don't think you really shared what helped you make that shift post your baseball career to be able to find out those values for who you are and to start to develop those habits so that you could go on and become this great role model and great leader for so many young men out there.
So I had two convicting experiences that really got me connected to my purpose and got me connected to understanding all the things I needed to learn. Because I think education is learning what needs to be learned to do what needs to be done. So one of the convicting moments was my wife Kelly. I had been given baseball hitting lessons for several years, and she challenged me and said, "Write down everything that you know about hitting." And I really didn't even know where to start because I was like, I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm just, and the parents don't care that I don't know what I'm doing. I'm basically glorified babysitting, but I really enjoyed it. And so when I started writing, I got obsessed with it, and I just continued to write down everything. Um, In fact, oftentimes there are some men that I used to train when they were boys that will come to me and say, "Hey, Coach CJ, I used to train with you," and I'm like, "Well, I can't remember your name. What's your name?" And they'll give me their name, and I'll look in my phone, and I've got notes of them from 10, 15 years ago. And so, within that convicting moment um, of not knowing where to start and not having this information, I started to write, and then a friend who became a mentor, Bill McClellan, took all of the information and created a methodology that I use today called at bats. And so that gives me some guiding principles on how to start and what's next and so on and so forth. The second convicting experience that really got me connected to knowing my values and really committed to being a major league citizen, in 2007, I was 9 years post my playing career and coaching, and Stan Conway, who is a white man, I was training his middle school age son, Davis. And up until this point, right now I've got 43 um, clients that I've been a part of their development that have become Major League Baseball players. But at that point, I had maybe had 10, which was still pretty significant. And Stan, a white man, said, "CJ," he said, "there are three things that I want to share with you." And it wasn't this simple in the way he did it. It was a longer conversation. But he said, "Number one, you are a good coach, but if you were as good as you said you were, and you claim to be, your rates wouldn't be so low." He said, "You can't be the best and the cheapest at the same time." So I got to thinking, hey, I am a really good coach, and I'm living under this notion that I'm doing it for the kids, which was stupid because even though I do want to do it for the kids, I also have a family. So I need to really get paid. And by the way, Bentleys never go on sale. So if you're a really good coach, I mean, you shouldn't be out here doing things for free. Now, there are parts of me that can be free, and I can give a discount on parts of me, but nobody should ever get the fullness of me um, for free. So that was one thing. The second thing he said, "It's just too easy for people to get access to you. So you can't be that good because somebody can walk off the street and be in here with you in the next hour, and your rates are cheap. So, you'll wear yourself out. It's just being all things to all people." But then the third thing that he said, which really got me connected to lead and my life purpose now, and this is a white man, he said, "There's a decline of blacks in baseball and you're not doing anything about it." And that right there just rocked me to the core. So that is why we started Lead. Had Stan Conway, a white man, not convicted me in that moment, Lead would have never gotten started. I would not be in the inner city of Atlanta serving boys with excellence the way people did for me.
Yeah, and what you just shared with me there, and your work, like it's really powerful. It's really important. I think race definitely has been something that has been more in the spotlight, especially since George Floyd. But it's been something that's been deep on my heart to come on and have somebody on to talk about on this podcast in a way that really serves coaches to help address this issue. And then I also recently read this book called Of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves, which talks about how young men, you talked about suicide, but how young men are really, really struggling in America, depression, unemployment, educationally across the board, but more so than any other group, it's young black men. And you've talked about that a lot today, how the system is working against young black men than more than any other really group in America. And I think, you know, there is no silver bullet to a system. There's many levers that need to be pulled. If you look at the system, we all play a part of that system. But if you look at the system, like what are 3, 4, 5 levers that really need to be pulled, the things that need to be done to better support young black men moving forward in America and be even potentially beyond?
Yes. So, first of all, y'all's questions are just absolutely amazing. I'm just sitting here saying to myself, like, Lee's been around 17 years. If I had been asked this question 17 years ago, I I would have just dropped the mic and just left out of here a long time ago. So Black people are fighting for the benefit of the doubt, respect, and trust. So again, that's the context. Like if our context is right, then life is going to be so much easier. Then people will hear our content. Racism, before it's about people, it's about power. So it's a structure. It's not an event. It's about power. And when we break down that power, it is influence and affluence. It's relationships. It's money. And then there's this advocacy piece. So because you take President Obama, even with the influence and affluence that he had, I mean, he still was vilified and was still um, verbally attacked publicly. And so what we are focusing on is those three things: influence, affluence, and advocacy. So we work really hard to build up this social capital, this financial capital, but then advocate with clarity and champion Black boys. And that's our calling, and then we do that well. The other thing is, you know, mentorship is the floor and sponsorship is the ceiling. And Black youth in Atlanta are over mentored and under sponsored. People want to start mentoring programs because it is the easiest thing to do as opposed to sponsorship. So, you know, you can go in and you can mentor Black boys, but then you also need to be providing them opportunities to now put into to practice and then play the things that you've been teaching them. So when I started thinking about the structure of racism and how to beat it, um, context before content. So make sure that Black boys and Black people are getting the benefit of the doubt, respect, and trust, so that we can be heard and seen. Um, and then making sure that influence, affluence, and advocacy, the advocacy piece being very key. And then, you know, mentoring is the floor and sponsorship is the ceiling. So if we do those things within those three things and making sure it's done in sequence, then I think that racism won't end. But for sure, with us, with the relationships that we have, including you all, people are going to look at the Black boys differently that's in our program if they are a lead ambassador. When people see that logo and attached, because lastly, what I'll say is you know, our accountability is very swift. If you're not doing what you're supposed to do to where you can add value to us, you are no longer going to be with us. And I will not lose a night of sleep on it whatsoever. Because if you do this, then I'm going to do this. And it's already predetermined, non-negotiable. And those that can continue on with us, you know, they're going to be okay. Not have a perfect life, but they'll be able to have a life of clarity.
Well, CJ, we'll get you out of here on this and doing a little bit of background and kind of listening to some other interviews. I think, one of the things that's been most impressive to me about you, besides the fact that you're a lifelong Cubs fan, just like I am, but you have attached an expectation to your alumni, to your graduates from your program, that they will one day give back as well. And I think that's a really unique approach. We see lots of organizations that are, for lack of a better term, they seem like rescue organizations. They're trying to save a life and to give them a better opportunity and send them out into the sea and God bless and good luck. But yet you really emphasize that there's a responsibility that comes with that eventual success, is that it's not just for yourself. And I'm curious as to just where does that come from? Because I think that's so unique for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, contribution is one of our social emotional learning capacities, and I think that other than with those three Black men that I was talking about, Emmett Johnson and TJ Wilson and Derek Stafford in that order. Derek Stafford was and still is very affluent. A black man that grew up in the same community as me, and he navigated that community and became a very successful NBA referee. Um, and he constantly talked to me about when I was a child, which I couldn't really understand, that I needed to grow up to be able to have influence and affluence so that I can help others. uh, Coach Emmett, I'm sure he shared the same thing, but I was so young. I was 8 years old, so I can't really remember the things that he said, but I saw how he lived his life. But TJ Wilson, a great man, he's now deceased, but he was interviewed by a local TV station, and they and I'm right there with him, and they asked him. They said, "Well, did you know that CJ would grow up to be what he's become?" um, doing the things that he's doing. And he said, I didn't know. And so that's not damning, but at the same time, it was one of those things where it's like, I want to be a coach that is very clear on what I'm expecting. And so if and when it happens to our boys, I'm not surprised and they're not surprised. In Atlanta, um, it, it's just too hard for black people for me to be spending my time and my spiritual gifts and earthly talents to be invested in the kids who can't help solve this problem for black people in this city. I mean, that would just be stupid. So, we're a 17-year-old organization right now, and we operated slightly under $2 million. My goal is, when we turn 25, I want 25% of our revenue to come from our current program participants as well as our alumni. So, by the year 25, we need to be a $10 million organization with a lot of the expansion that we're making. And so that doesn't mean that the boys and girls are going to just cut us a check, but that does mean that they need to be working for companies, and they need to be going to those companies and soliciting on our behalf to help us with our goals. And we need to be very clear on what we're going to be using the money for. But even also here in the state of Georgia now, with name, image, and likeness, youth as young as 14 years old can actually get paid to play sports. And some people may look at that as controversial, but I think about the fact that in order for me to make money so I can take my girlfriend out, even though I was 14 years old, had to go to the movies and all that stuff. I was having to cut grass and wash cars and do all those kind of things. So we are a part of kids' ability to make money for NIL, even right now. Um, but league can't have fun without funding. If we don't have money, then we can't do the work. And if we can't do the work, then we'll sunset this thing and move on to something else. But I don't think that's God's plan for this thing to not live beyond me. And I'm ready to retire as soon as they will allow me to. And I love doing the work that I'm doing, but I think it will be so much better if our future executives and leaders of this organization are able to get the baton and run with it. So, the why I do it is because of what was done for me, people that modeled it. But what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to do it at a level that goes beyond anybody's wildest dreams, and then just challenge other people to take it even beyond mine. But I'm the chief visionary officer, so at the end of the day, I don't have to tactically know how to do it. I just got to have a vision.
I love it. I love you sharing your heart with us today. I love you sharing your vision. You also shared a lot of really your framework, your models for, like you said, you're also the weaponeer guy. You got all the weapons for all the coaches here, all the tools. So you shared some good stuff there. You've got a great book that shares some of that framework and your model for impact. Um, where can our listeners follow you? And potentially, I know that many people will be moved by the work that you're doing and will want to reach out and support it. Yeah, what can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so I have a personal website, which is iamcjstewart.com. We also have our website, leadcenterforyouth.org. So four is spelled out FOR, leadcenterforyouth.org. And then all of our social media handles are on there. I write a blog once a week, every week, and been doing that for over 13 years. So that's on the Lead website. I'm very active on Instagram, uh, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And so, every day I'm just sharing things that I'm struggling with, successes that I'm having, and the importance of using that success to serve others. But I'm also sharing stupid things that I'm doing, um, which I don't want to be doing stupid things, but hey, it's just I share all these different things and getting feedback and just dialoguing because I want to learn, I want to be great, and I want to use that greatness to serve others.
So nearly everywhere I go and speak to coaches, I have at least one coach who gets defensive when I talk about the long-term ineffectiveness of what many would call old school coaching, the yelling, screaming, shaming, and belittling athletes to get them to play hard or break them down to build them up. Now, usually these coaches, they go on to say something like, that type of coaching may be the person I am today. And they say this as the person they are today is this perfect role model for athletes, which it isn't the case. I know when I used to use that defense, that wasn't the case. We all have room to grow. We all have limitations. And I appreciate CJ sharing those with us. Anyways, I appreciate CJ and his organization, the trauma-informed approach to coaching they have, the level of awareness CJ has of his own limitations as a coach, and the work they are doing as an organization to help address what I believe is a growing issue in society and sports today. Thanks for listening to the Coaching Culture Podcast. Please be sure to share the podcast with a friend in leadership or coaching, and then have a conversation with them about it. Also, be sure to check out tocculture.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter there for more culture building tips and tools.